Herein lies a crime that shocked the most peaceful country in the world. And don't just take my word for it. According to the 2025 Global Peace Index, Iceland ranks number 1 in the entire world for its low crime rate and tranquility. And that's exactly what makes this crime so shocking, because no one would have expected the level of brutality witnessed that day. And the killer left behind clues that seemed innocuous at the time, but in hindsight, they were simply the breadcrumbs left behind for something far more sinister. Let me take you back to that year, 2010. It's August 15th in Reykjavik, Iceland, and a 23-year-old woman named Hildur is about to make a discovery that will haunt her for the rest of her life. The previous night was eventful, so to speak, and this morning she makes her way to her fiancé's house. The two are very close and well known in the neighborhood. As she uses her key and steps inside, what she finds at the top of the staircase is an image that will unfortunately live with her for the rest of her life. Her fiancé, 37-year-old Hans Forhe Helgason, lies completely unclothed and covered in blood. 19 stab wounds and lacerations were discovered all over his body. Initial first responders may have had a hard time on determining some details, but many agreed this was the most brutal crime scene they had ever come across. But let's back up. How did we get here? The night before, Saturday, August 14th, had started so normally. Hans picked up Hildur for a family celebration in Vogar. Around 2 a.m., Hans drove Hildur to downtown Reykjavik so she could meet up with some other friends to continue her night out. Hans himself just wanted to go to bed, so he drove himself home whilst Hildur stayed behind and continued pub crawling with some friends, hitting various bars and spots such as the famous Café Amsterdam. But here's where things get strange. The next morning, Hildur had no recollection of what happened next. She found herself waking up at 11 a.m. at a strange place. And as things came into focus, she recognized this was a childhood friend's house, one of the friends she went pub crawling with, and she had no memory of how she got there. She was adamant that she only had 2 drinks last night, and now she wondered if she had been drugged instead. What else happened to her if she was drugged? A possibility she didn't want to entertain any further. She confronted her friend. Why didn't he drive her home instead of bringing her to his place? Her friend was taken aback by her tone and questioning, but he explained that he was driving under the influence and didn't want to drive far. So instead of taking her to her fiancé's place, he brought her to his own home. He said nothing happened between them. In fact, she was so intoxicated that he had to hold her up whilst bringing her inside. Listening to this story, Hildur is panicking. She's worried what her fiancé will think, as she didn't come home and spent the night out at a guy's place. Worried that her fiancé would be angry, she calls him at first, then again, but each time he doesn't pick up. Now she really thinks he is upset, and she has no choice but to rush there immediately, with that same friend to drive her there. When she arrives, her friend offers to go in with her to help alleviate any potential misunderstanding between her and her fiancé and diffuse the situation. Hildur declines, telling her friend it would only make the situation worse if her fiancé sees her with him. And when she entered the house, not even in her wildest imagination would she expect to see her loving fiancé so brutally stabbed, almost butchered. The forensic evidence indicated that Hans had been attacked while sleeping. He was found lying in the hallway leading to his bedroom. 19 stab wounds, most concentrated on his neck, back, face, arms, and hands. The defensive wounds tell the story of a man who woke up under attack and fought desperately for his life. The wounds and the rage evident in the attack shows that whoever did this did so with hatred and extreme prejudice. There are no signs of a break-in, but one door is found unlocked. The perpetrator likely entered through there, and they don't believe there was anyone else in the house when the crime occurred. As word spread, Iceland is in shock. Over 40 police officers are assigned to the case. Every major media outlet covers what will become one of the most sensational cases in Icelandic history. Who could have done this? The police started digging into Haynes' background, trying to figure out who he really was. On the surface, Haynes seemed like a pretty successful guy. He was the managing director of a confectionery company called Goa, owned by his dad, and he also owned several KFC franchises in Lithuania. By all accounts, he was well liked. No one had a bad word to say about him, and most described him as a genuinely nice dude, always ready to help out, with friends from all walks of life. But as the investigators dug deeper, they found out not everyone around Haynes was as clean as he seemed. The first suspect popped up pretty quickly, a debt collector Haynes was reportedly scared of. Now, in a small country like Iceland, debt collection isn't just business, it gets personal. And this guy, he had a reputation for being pretty aggressive. Then there was the other name, a man Haynes had a serious clash with over an international business deal, a major money dispute. And then there was Haynes' ties back to Lithuania. He had just returned from there. You see, he was also a dad with a child from a previous relationship. And because he lived in Iceland, he barely got time to see his own kid. Recent news of one of his business partners in Lithuania being arrested for drug possession also piqued interest. Suddenly, the case started to feel a lot bigger. This wasn't just some random stabbing. Could Haynes have been tangled up in something far more dangerous, such as drug cartels? The Icelandic media couldn't share many details, which led to wild speculation. Reporters and news outlets were publishing all kinds of content, speculation gone wild. They believed perhaps the case was going nowhere, but behind the scenes, the police were hard at work, quietly in the dark. They were working around the clock, combing through every bit of Haynes' computer and phone data, piecing the puzzle together. There was a clue at the crime scene. The forensic evidence found a bloody shoe print right next to Haynes' bed. They photograph it and send it abroad for analysis. On August 25th, a call comes in from the German police. The shoe print has been identified. It matches an Adidas barrack sneaker, and only a handful of them were sold in Iceland, and this one was locally purchased. Then there was the business of the killer himself. The police theorized that the person who committed this crime had knowledge of Haynes' home, the layout of the bedroom. Perhaps they had been inside before. They shifted the killer's profile to one that knew Hans on a close, personal level. And that's when they discovered a YouTube video. Now this was 2010 and YouTube had only been around for 5 years. The idea that someone would document their obsession online and then commit such a horrific act was almost unthinkable, and posted more than a year before the crime by someone Hildur, Hans' fiancé, knew very well. Her childhood friend, Gunnar Ru Sigurþo, the same friend who had driven her home that evening, the same friend whose house she had woken up in with no memory of how she got there. Let me read you exactly what Gunnar said in that video. Hi, this video is meant for Hildur. This is rather difficult for me to say, as I'm incredibly shy. But Hildur is a girl that I've been going out with every weekend, almost every weekend. And she is without a doubt the most special human being I've ever met. Now at this point, it seems rather sweet that he would post his love confession online. But listen on. I became so incredibly happy only being close to her. That's all it takes. And this is meant for you, because I think I've fallen in love with you. I know it will probably be rather difficult for you. You seem like you've had your troubles with guys in the past. The message goes into this whole white knight territory, as if he's the only one who can see her, understand her, and is the right one for her. And then it gets kind of personal when he says, I know that you're getting over a rather unhappy situation with an ex of yours. I know you don't like to talk about it, but just want to say that I'm here for you. The problem with all this is that Hildur is happily dating Hans, and Gunnar has created this entire fantasy in his head where she needs rescuing, and he's the only one who can do this for her. And he tops it off by removing all doubt by saying, and I'll say to you that I am completely sober, so I have no excuse to deny this. I love you. This wasn't a sweet confession of love. This was a manifesto of possession, and initially, many people online expressed support for Gunnar, seeing it as an awkward but harmless stunt. But Hildur saw it for what it really was. She made it very clear to him that she was in a happy relationship with Hans and that her feelings didn't reciprocate. She stopped talking to Gunnar for a while. Eventually, he apologized, and they started hanging out again as friends. What Hildur didn't know was that Gunnar's obsession hadn't ended. It had just gone underground. Born on March 15th, 1987, Gunnar had experienced trauma that would shape his entire life. When he was just 9 years old, his father took his own life by gunshot, and he did this in front of Gunnar and other relatives. The trauma left Gunnar socially isolated for most of his life, often refusing to admit or believe that his father was gone. He lived in a fantasy world where his father was still alive and would be coming back. The isolation continued until he met Hildur in elementary school. While they were friends at first, they would grow apart, until sometime in the future when they started hanging out again when they were older. And that's when Gunnar developed his obsession. But again, Hildur was with Hans, and Gunnar simply couldn't accept this reality. On March 25th, 2009, more than a year before the crime, when Gunnar created that YouTube channel and uploaded that confession video, he believed this was it. But when Hildur rejected him, something inside of him simply snapped. He began carrying out this revenge in his own mind over and over again, where he would eliminate Gunnar, not because he didn't like him, but because he was freeing Hildur of her one true love, which was him. Fast forward now, and the police have brought Gunnar in for questioning. When they searched this car, they found traces of red stains in the trunk, but Gunnar denied any involvement at first. However, his behavior struck the investigators as odd. When detectives left the room, he asked the guard for what proof the police had against him. He was described as devoid of emotion, no grief, no sadness for Hans, even though he knew him and they were somewhat friends. At the time, police held him for 24 hours, but due to lack of evidence, they had to release him. But now remember that shoe print, and very much like a creepy, twisted version of a Cinderella story, when police compared that bloody shoe print to the shoe that was taken from Gunnar during his arrest, they were a perfect match. His shoes appeared clean to the naked eye, but as soon as luminol was applied to the soles of it, they glowed. Confirmation that he had stepped in blood and cleaned up the shoes afterwards. On his second arrest, faced with this evidence, Gunnar confessed. And what he revealed was maybe even more disturbing than the crime itself. He said he was surprised at how quickly he became a suspect. Gunnar had been planning this for months, ever since that YouTube video. He thought he'd been careful. He studied crime shows, especially CSI, to learn how to avoid getting caught. During interrogation, his true mindset came out. I loved Hildur. She was supposed to be with me. She was not supposed to be with him. This wasn't love. This was possession. The planning was extensive and methodical. Gunnar stole latex gloves, a knife, a balaclava that he kept in his car trunk. He even made shoe covers out of garbage bags, an idea straight out of CSI. So why were his footprints left behind? Well, the bag tore as he walked. And how exactly did he carry out this crime? Around midnight, he parked his car at a convenience store and walked around the neighborhood, knife in hand, thinking about what he was about to do. This wasn't the first time. Gunnar admitted he'd been thinking about killing Hans for quite a while, but had stopped himself each time. Each time, though, his planning was more detailed. And that night, he stopped himself again. Instead of going through with it, he went downtown and had a drink. But here's the twisted part. He ended up drinking again with Hildur, the woman he was obsessed with. Because she got drunk, and because he took her back to his place, something dark clicked inside him. He realized this was the perfect opportunity. This was meant to be. He couldn't stop thinking about what he'd planned all this time, and this was the moment of truth. He realized he had everything ready in his car, much like Dexter and his kill kit, and therefore this had to be the perfect moment. So Gunnar drove over to Hans' house whilst Hildur was passed away at his home. He put on his latex gloves and a sheepskin hat, and then a big coat. He walked the last few steps, pacing with his knife in hand, but he knew the time had come, and he knew that the side door was always unlocked. And that's how he got into the bedroom, where Hans was sleeping alone. Gunnar said he stood over Hans for several minutes before attacking. Several minutes just watching him sleep. He said he was waiting for someone to come stop him. Anyone, even God, to intervene. But no one came. Gunnar felt that this was meant to be, that he had made his choice and destiny had made the choice for him. During the attack, he stabbed Hans repeatedly, in the chest, back, and hands, until the knife pierced his heart, lungs, and kidneys, and then he stabbed him some more, just to make sure. After the brutal attack, Gunnar ran out, took out his coat, gloves, and shoe covers, put everything in a plastic bag with the knife, and threw it into the harbor. He then drove home, where Hildur was still asleep. And here's one of the most disturbing details. He kissed Hildur on the lips before going to sleep on the couch. He did it all for her, and now she was finally his. This is some kind of a psychotic moment I can't even conjure up what it's similar to. It's part American Psycho, part something completely else, but this is a true story. The next evening, when news broke out that Hans had been found, Gunnar's response was shockingly casual. He emailed work saying he was sick, then simply started playing video games to distract himself. When police asked about his feelings for Hans, Gunnar said Hans was a nice, decent guy, but out of jealousy, he wanted to get rid of him. That's how he put it. And that's about it. He didn't hate Hans, he just saw him as an obstacle. And when Hildur heard the confession, she was in shock and completely broke down. This was her friend since elementary school. A quote, very lonely, innocent, but decent guy, she said at the time. And the sad thing about this entire case is that Hans knew about Gunnar's obsession with his girlfriend, and he felt pity for him. He had even suggested that Gunnar hang out with them so he wouldn't feel so lonely. Hans was always kind to Gunnar because he felt sorry for him. Therefore, this was a betrayal of not one, but two people, and it was finally complete. As the case eventually moved to trial, the focus shifted to Gunnar's mental state. Was there any kind of a defense that could justify what happened? And indeed, the defense brought up the trauma of Gunnar witnessing his father commit self-harm in front of everyone, and this fractured his psyche and made him vulnerable and childlike. They said he couldn't reason properly. They said he suffered from dual personality disorder and what they call love sickness. The psychiatric evaluation diagnosed him with schizophrenia. On March 1, 2011, Gunnar was found not guilty by reason of insanity and sentenced to a mental institution. But Hans' family was outraged. They called it absolutely unacceptable that Hans' life was estimated as worthless, while a cold-blooded killer got away with planning the murder for nearly a year. And the prosecution did not let it go. They appealed to the Iceland Supreme Court. On October 13, 2011, the decision was overturned. Gunnar was found guilty and sentenced to 16 years in prison. The Supreme Court's reasoning was key. While Gunnar did have mental illness, he was still in control of his actions. Months of careful planning showed he understood the consequences. Plus, the time of the first trial, his obsessive feelings for Hildur were gone. If he really suffered from love sickness, as was argued, those feelings should have lasted. Gunnar's extensive preparation and how long he planned showed a single-minded intention to eliminate Hans, and that's also what Hans Helgason's family believes. But the story doesn't end there. In July 2019, Gunnar made headlines again in Icelandic media. Even though he hadn't served the regular 2/3 of his sentence, he was granted supervised release. And how did people find out? Because he'd created a Tinder account. Yeah, a convicted killer was back on the dating apps. Today Gunnar lives in a halfway house under supervision, and he works for the Icelandic Red Cross. He refuses interviews and has never returned to YouTube. Hans Forhe Helgason was only 37 years old when his life was tragically cut short. A successful businessman, a loving fiancé, and a man kind enough even to the one who would ultimately betray him. Oh, and there was no evidence to suggest that Hildur was under the influence other than the 2 drinks she supposedly had. but I highly doubt that. The fact that she was fast asleep the entire time of the crime likely suggests that she was drugged, but unfortunately, there's no evidence I can find on this. Unfortunately, there's a sad lesson in this true crime. Perhaps it's childhood trauma, but really, it's obsession, and when left unchecked, can lead to some of the most horrific outcomes, sometimes at complete innocence. Gunnar's YouTube video wasn't a confession of love. It was a digital breadcrumb trail leading straight to a horrific crime. So, what do you think about Iceland's justice system? Let me know in the comments. And hey, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to get notified when new stories drop. Stay safe out there, guys. Victor signing out.